All right, everyone, welcome back. We are on day 6 of Navaratri, and we have another very special guest today who I'm very honored to bring in with us. Dasi is a teacher of mine. I did my Tantra yoga teacher training with her some years ago in India, and she is a wealth of knowledge. And what stood out to me when I was studying with Dasi in India is this strength and steadiness that in my own journey as a sadhaka or a practitioner, it's something we go through these wobbles on the journey, and eventually we really find the stability no matter our life circumstances. And that was something that really stood out to me working with Dasi, was just this really beautiful soft power. And so I'm very, very happy to be introducing Dasi today. And our topic is one that just feels so alive in the world of, here we are in Navaratri, we're working in the grace of the mother. We are exploring women practitioners in Tantra, and admittedly, the landscape for a woman practitioner is very different from a male practitioner due to our hormonal cycles, the initiatory gateways we go through physically as women. And so this is what we're going to be talking about today. And I am very excited about that. So we'll be talking about things relating to menstruation in practice, perimenopause, the transition, and we'll see what else we get into with that. But I'd love to give a warm welcome to Dasi. Thank you so much for being here with us. And is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself before we begin?
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Halo, really, and the opportunity to be here sharing in such a sacred time of the year. Let's just roll.
Let's just roll. Okay.
I'm sure some of the threads will come in if they need to do, just to share a little bit more.
Yes. Well, in the first question that I'm asking everybody, so we will get to know a little bit more about you, is what led you onto this path? Like, as a Westerner, what were some of the pivotal moments that drew you into being a sadhaka?
I came into yoga when I was a teenager. I was studying psychotherapy, actually, and I came to yoga looking for relaxation, and then it just all opened. I really feel like the psychotherapy and the yoga came hand in hand, because it was a very holistic psychotherapy journey, and that was it. Slowly, my party years fell away. Yoga came more grounded. And then at the age of 25, I left my home country, England, and traveled a little bit, and then found myself in Asia. And that's 22 years ago now. So I reside in Greece at the moment, but still go back to India every year for a few months. And within that, there's been different pinnacle moments of my path. Like, I was really delving into Tantra yoga and the sexual Tantra for, I would say, 10 years, from the age of 26. And then actually 13 years ago, I met my teacher, my guru now, and I've been on the traditional tantric path since then. And somehow everything seems to have just weaved together. When I say that, I mean yoga, traditional tantra, devotion, ritual, dance, even Christianity. Somehow it just all flows as one in my life at the moment. And this is where I am. Yeah.
So beautiful. I love how it really feels like that. It's like we kind of enter this stream, and at some point we're just carried, and that's it. And it's just, I love how you talk about that. I always think of lineage, I think sometimes in the West, we have this idea of lineage as it's like one static thing, lineage is very particular, but really it's like these many rivulets that kind of come together. And I think that's beautiful. I feel like yoga and tantra are like that. I always call them sisters because they're really sister paths. So thank you for sharing that. And
And I feel that also within Tantra, like the true Tantra, you can have your sampradaya, you can have your path, but at the same time, because Tantra is a path of life, all these different rivers can just flow together. Like being here in Greece now, the Orthodox Christianity is a really big part of my life, and actually has been before I moved here. And I just love to see the Tantrism of this path as well, you know. So, and then my Celtic roots from England, it's same.
it is. And I think that's a beautiful thing to mention as we start out, because we're working with universal principles, right? It's so every culture is found, the work with the elements that show up in the rituals, even within Christianity, are these through lines, and they're all just connecting us to that deeper source that we're all seeking. And so on that journey to source, that which we are moving towards, whether we call it Ma or Jesus, it doesn't matter, right? That moving towards that wholeness. As a woman, it's a very unique journey. And I think what I'm really interested in is, so much in the worlds of yoga and tantra, we have learned through very male dominant lineages, right? And they don't always totally fit the experience of being a woman, of having hormonal cycles like this. And so it's very interesting to me to talk about this journey through that lens. And I'd love to just open us up into your sharing of that expertise. And maybe we can start with the female cycle itself and then go into the larger female life cycle with perimenopause, like that.
How do you mean the female cycle in itself? Because we have so many cycles.
Yes. Like the menstrual cycle, like menstruation and like that.
Yeah. I'm 47 now, and it's that growth of experience that if I knew what I know now 20, 30 years ago, the life would have been navigated surely differently. But I guess it's through the experience of the last decades, right from starting my menstruation and everything that unfolded in these last decades to where I am now, and really having to, I would say, learn things almost by myself, like pulling together the dots of what exactly is our hormonal system, how does it play out in our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual growth. It's just epic when I see it now. And I'm still putting this together. It's a jigsaw puzzle that has thousands and thousands of pieces. So I'm still placing them together. And it's starting to become pretty coherent. I must say, at this point in my life, I would probably say the most healthiest that I have felt. Yeah. In terms of my strength in my body and capability on some levels. And I do believe it's because somehow there hasn't been enough guidance. I have been in so many women's circles, had so many teachers, both men and women, and somehow the guidance around hormones and menstrual health just wasn't really addressed. Maybe it is now, and I was somehow just in an era where it wasn't. Because I do notice, because I do a lot of following now and research to really kind of discover more. And definitely more people are talking about it, but I'm also curious about what's being talked about in terms of menstrual health and hormonal changes, because there's still, I believe, a really big push towards the synthetic ways of dealing with this. And I definitely have been a woman in my life that has been through numerous unnatural ways of managing my hormonal system. I was introduced as a young woman to the contraceptive pill, the contraceptive injection, and the implications of that as I grew into my woman years. I didn't realize what they were. And I teach teacher trainings now and women's retreats, and how many women that practice yoga are still coming onto the retreats and courses that have been on the pill for like over decades. I mean, I was lucky. I kind of shook it all off out of my system after the first 5 years. But some people are on this stuff for a long time. And what it's done in my body, I will speak about it. I'm not a medical expert, but I know what happened in my body and I see what's happening in others, is that the repercussions of taking these synthetic hormones, and even if there are people listening that are not who are, you know, making these decisions the natural way, for sure we have people in our life that are not, because this is a big monopoly out there controlling the hormones of women. And the repercussions is that it just messes so much with our hormonal levels that implicate our physical health and mental health, and what I understand now as spiritual well-being. And I don't want to get too technical, because surely somebody might say, oh yeah, no, it's this, that, and you know, I'm just figuring it out, yeah. But ultimately, what usually happens is the hormones are messed with to a point where when a lot of synthetic hormones go into the body, our own body doesn't know how to produce these naturally, and it can take years to recover. And in my case, my body didn't produce a lot of progesterone, and it's created a lot of excess estrogen. They call it estrogen dominance nowadays. And this has constituted a lot of emotional tendencies, emotional turmoil. I loved it when you said that you saw me as a pillar of stability, because, okay, sometimes I can be in that, but I believe that that's because of my practices and my sadhana. If I wouldn't have had that in my life, I am pretty sure I would have been dancing in the realms of mental health difficulties, you know, if I hadn't have had my meditation, my yoga and mantra and everything else. And so what's happened as well is we're finding a lot of women have cysts and fibroids and all things like this. And, you know, because I have a cyst, I have an endometriosis cyst that I've known about it since 2012. And I was going to getting it checked, just making sure there was health around that for many, many years. And not one gynecologist told me that it was because of excess estrogen in my body. And so they tell you all these things. They tell you, oh, yeah, it could lead to cancer, and there's this and there's this. You could have surgery. It's never going to go away. Actually, my cyst shrank humongously thanks to homeopathy and healthy lifestyle. And long story short, they just don't tell you the basic like science of it. You know, it's caused from excess estrogen. And what do? In those cases, you find ways to naturally increase your progesterone. And I do feel that that part of the jigsaw puzzle came pretty late on for me in my 40s. If I would have had that knowledge when I was in my late 30s, I think my perimenopause would have been a lot easier, because we can be starting perimenopause like 10 years before we actually move into menopause. And quite honestly, now I'm on the threshold of menopause. I had like 7 months recently where I didn't have a bleed. So I've just the last 2 months had a bleed, but I'm pretty every month I know it could be my last, you know? So the essence is, if anybody, any sister out there is dealing with anything I'm saying makes some sense or you can relate to it, just get your hormones checked. See if you have where your progesterone and your estrogen levels are at. And the way to do that is on the 21st day after your bleed, you get a test called estradiol. estradiol, and it will tell you your levels, and you'll be able to see at that point, you know, what's going on in your body. And of course, if you are at the point of, you know, the midst of perimenopause, it could always be that that is very fluctuating anyway. But I just find it very insightful. And then the reason I know I've really gone into menopause is because I got these checks this year, and both of my progesterone and estrogen dropped to almost nil. And then I was like, oh my God, look at me now. I'm like, I'm a woman, and my these two hormones that are so important for us are almost non-existent in my body now. And what's that about? You know, how's that going to be for me in my life? And how does my body adapt to that? And of course, the big push now is HRT, you know, and it's huge. It's absolutely huge what people advocate, you know, if you want to keep the fullness of your hair, and, you know, and go like all these different things. And of course, I think HRT, if somebody is in a really bad suicidal state, which is what can happen when these changes happen. I know some sisters that really struggled, then I can understand HRT can help. But there are so many natural ways to deal with this. And a lot of them go to Ayurveda and just healthy living and understanding our body as doshas, and understanding that at this time when we go into perimenopause and definitely menopause, we become much more pitta in our body. So finding ways to deal with that pitta and how to keep it balanced. And I found ways that have stopped me from getting hot flushes now by really understanding my constitution and how to manage that. So it's a journey, and I feel that the more we can be informed about this, the more we can take back our power from big pharma, from, you know, the doctors that don't really inform us very much about these situations. And knowledge is everything, you know, knowledge is everything. So I'm talking about this for people's women's physical well-being and also mental well-being. But what I would like today, Halo, in a moment, if you don't have any questions at this point, is to also speak about the implications of all of this spiritually, because this has really been like, I'm still working it out, but it's something to share.
Yeah, I think we should definitely segue into that. I think what I just want to, I don't have questions, but I want to just reiterate what you're sharing. It's, you know, the female experience. I've had this vision for a long time now that we're like marionette puppets, you know, on the strings of our hormones. Like our whole life experience is really strongly dictated by hormones in a different way than a male experience. Right. And this very delicate balance. And what you're speaking to, I think, is so important, because we live in a world where, yes, the hormonal birth controls and HRT, but then also, you know, this estrogen dominance is so common now because of microplastics, because of stress levels, because of, you know, we're up against a lot as women in the modern day. And it is important that we're learning more. Like here I am I'm 38. I'm already noticing some shifts, and I've also struggled with low progesterone. So that's been a big piece of balancing my hormones in my own journey. And, you know, my, I guess I'm going to call them PMS symptoms for lack of a better term. The window that I have those has gotten longer as I've gotten older, and just these interesting things where I'm like, oh, okay. So it's constant, a constant journey to find that kind of homeostasis and that kind of balance, which is why to me it makes such a difference as a practitioner. If you're approaching these systems as a man versus a woman, it's a completely different experience, right? And you're right that it's not talked about. Like we're not here I am at 38, and just only because I have friends now who are entering perimenopause, am I starting to learn more about it. Like you said, it can start over like up to 10 years before the actual menopause, which means women like myself in my late 30s can start to have the signs, you know, can start to have the hormonal shifts. Women in their early 40s, definitely. So I think it's wonderful that we're talking about this, because it's, for some reason, we have been a mystery in the medical system. They only have band-aids for us. They don't have actual solutions, right? Oftentimes it becomes a heroine's journey to find our own way and to find our own kind of path with it all. And so, and I think women starting to talk about it like we're doing here and helping each other, and especially women at your phase of life, we can look back and be like, oh, if I'd known this, then like how different would things be? So I just, it feels so important. Thank you for sharing all of that. And yes, let's go into the spiritual implications of it all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, my husband says something really beautiful. He said it a few years ago, when we first met. He said he really respects women on the spiritual path who actually come for meditation. He said, because the complexity, and it was pretty wise, I think, coming from, you know, a man that doesn't have that hormonal structure in the same way. He said, because he could see the complexity of women's hormones makes it much more harder for us to meditate. You know, that rise in estrogen, you know, I mean, 1 minute we can be in our cycle and we're, you know, like meditation is just, it's that alignment. And then the next minute, it's like just trying to sit down and just like keep the eyes closed because of the changes in the hormones, and then the moon's energies coming in and just amplifying everything, because ultimately we are Shakti. We are energy, and anything that is going to amplify that, whether it would be hormones, full moon, emotional states, everything, it is just, yeah, it can send us into amazing alignment and absolute chaos. And so navigating that in our personal practice, God, is still something that I'm working on, really. And I really believe that Ayurveda gives us something to hold on to. My two anchors are Ayurveda and homeopathy, actually. And I think within the Ayurveda, just really getting to grips with our prakriti, our doshas. If somebody here doesn't quite understand that, please just have a look into this, yeah? What your predominant doshas are, and then understand how they can really change. Like when we're approaching in our PMS period, as you've said, and all that heat is starting to build in the body, and the increase of estrogen levels rise to the point before we bleed. It's such a roller coaster. And this is where we start to maybe get migraines as well. I only started to get migraines in my 40s, actually, but wow. And it was because of the heat rising. So there's two things here. That heat and that power is what the tantrics know as an absolute force that we can utilize to awaken consciousness. But we need that level of consciousness within ourselves through our practices, through everything that we've been learning all of these years, to be able to keep that anchor while all this is moving inside of us. So this is where the practices are so important when all of this starts to increase more and more as we move into perimenopause and eventually menopause. And if we can also see that the fluctuations in our minds and the changes that occur, because the more we meditate, the more we can watch the mind's movements, the more we can see emotions are arising. And the more meditation I believe we do, the more we become that witness where we realize that we are not the thoughts. We are not this huge anxiety, because, you know, for some years I was waking up in the middle of the night, premenstrual, with anxiety, like absolute rushes that I experienced. I could almost feel the hormones rushing through my body, but my brain figured that as anxiety, that's how it could relate to it, but it was just strong movements of energy. And as soon as I got to grips on this, I would just lie there and just go, it's just your hormones. It's just your freaking hormones. And started to use the meditation and different practices that I have, something as simple as, you know, counting my breath. I mean, I'm sure many of you here know different pranayama techniques, and I'm sure those of you studying with Halo, you can learn from her some of them. But just simple meditation, pranayama techniques like inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 4 can be an absolute anchor when all this is moving, because you're stabilizing the mind, you're stabilizing the breath, stabilizing the energy, and then you can get that conscious grip on what's happening inside. So this is one thing, as it's all weaving together. Now, there's another part that I want to speak about spiritually that might relate to some people and might not relate to others, but I think it's good to mention this. In the spiritual traditional tantric path that I'm in, and I have been for all of these years now, we actually don't practice most of our practices relating to mantra, yantra, even the devotional aspects, even including arti. We don't practice anything like this. That's our usual practice anyway, during menstruation. And I know that this is also the case in shamanic practices, in the South America shamanic practices. Also, this has also been a way of Middle Eastern practices, as far as I understand. And I would even say, even though it's never spoken about, even in Christianity, but nobody speaks about it, but you'll never see the women doing pujas or ceremony in the churches. And I believe it's because of what I'm going to say now, but of course, nobody speaks about that in certain traditions. But the beauty in traditional Tantra is that, at least what I've studied and learned, is that this is spoken about. That for some paths, it's important not to continue the same mantras that we would use in our everyday lives when we are in our menstrual energy flow. And the reason for that is because when we enter into menstruation flow, our energy changes from our usual practices that stimulate Rajasic and Sattvic energy, which is often a flow that naturally goes up through the body. And any of you doing yoga, using mantra, most practices that we experience will feel an upward flow of energy, yeah, even in our sexuality for women. Now, in menstruation time, we go into tamasic mode where our energy actually flows down. And it's absolutely obvious that that's happening because we have a downward flow of energy that can even be physically witnessed as blood leaving through our yoni and releasing a downward flow. Also, those that will experience this quite often feel heavy at different times in the cycle, maybe just before or during. We can feel tiredness, low mood. All of these things constitute tamasic energy. Now, that doesn't mean that tamasic energy cannot be transmuted. Of course it can. There are many paths in Tantra that actually transmute tamasic energy. But particularly in the menstruation time, at least in the path that I'm in now, it says that when we menstruate, let nature be nature. Let that tamasic flow be that tamasic flow. Don't try to use practices to lift up the energy, because then we're kind of like going against Ma. I'm not saying this for everybody's path, but in the one that I'm in, it's like we're going against what needs to happen in our bodies. And I speak from experience because before I came to this path 13 years ago, I was highly influenced from spiritual practices that encouraged us during menstruation to lift the energy up. I was one of these yoginis doing headstand, shoulder stand, Uddiyana Bandha, you name it, like trying to bring the energy flow up. And I just don't do that anymore because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. It's like I want to bleed. I want to let it flow in this way. Anyway, on the path I'm in, we actually change our mantras. So when we come to menstruation time, we use an entirely different mantra that resonates with tamasic energy. It actually resonates with a goddess called Uchista Chandalini, who is a particular Devi that is tamasic energy and can help to embrace and utilize that energy for what it is. And I've experienced it in my own body using these mantras. I can feel that that energy remains as a power, but a refined power. So that Tama still exists in my body. I'm not trying to change it in any way, but it becomes much more refined. And I don't know if I could say spiritualized in that. Would that be a right word? But it just becomes somehow more manageable, yeah, and more beautiful, I would say. So we do this also. We use, if we're obviously initiated into this, it's possible to use different yantras as well. So we use different mantras, different yantras, and that's it. We just go into menstruation sadhana, and that's it. We don't try to do anything else. And it's not always easy. There's been many occasions I have been with the Sangha, and we've been like on pilgrimage in different places, and I've not been able to go in the temples or this or this. But hey, this is my moment. This is Mars' moment in that form in my body. So it really is about embracing that. And I believe when we start to accept our cycles in this way, then we start to just accept our bodies and stop trying to change what's naturally there and happening inside of us, which is what the whole agenda is in managing female hormones and females' physical, reproductive, and mental well-being. It's like, let us just be as we are. And for those yoginis and those tantrikas that want to do sadhana, there is also a path for that. So this is one part, and I just want to add that what I've come to understand, and I said it to my husband recently, I want to get to a point where I can allow the cycles, I can really allow the cycles of my energy as a woman to be there, and the doshas as they move through my body, the increased pitta as I'm in menopause now, and this heaviness if I'm bleeding, and also this lightness of the sattva, but just continue to be in that awareness and supporting my body with just natural ways of ensuring that I rest. I'm taking harmonious herbs just to keep the doshas in balance. Because what I see is if I can take care of myself at this stage now, I can maintain my health mentally, physically. And if I do that, then all my practices are easier. I naturally can meditate more easily. My mind is simply more shanti because I've just brought a balance to my natural female energies, whatever moment I'm in. And so I'm working on that at the moment because I see that we can really run spiritually. There are so many things that we can do in our life. You know, we can take in this initiation, that initiation, this initiation. But what is the point of all that if when it comes to the moment of sadhana, our doshas are so out of balance, our constitution is so out of balance with all the disruptors that happen in life, that we can't really get the fruits of our practice. And so it's kind of like, watch this space, because I'm still working on it. But it's making more embodied sense to me now. And I will continue my detoxifications. That's one other thing to mention. Keep purifying your body, especially in times of perimenopause and menopause, because from unbalanced hormonal levels, it naturally creates excess toxins in our body and overloads the liver. So it's really important. I do panchakarma every year for at least 10 days, just to cleanse my body and try to keep my liver function healthy. And yeah, with the grace of our mother, may it be that I can keep this vessel balanced and, physically, mentally, and then, of course, just open myself to her grace with more consciousness. Yeah.
Jai Ma.
Jai
Well,
Ma.
on behalf of all women practitioners everywhere, thank you for doing this work and exploring this in a really conscious way, and starting to find those maps, because I mean, how did these systems birth to begin with? These were all maps that were discovered from deep spaces of communion, right? And so it's like the same with the female cycle. Through learning from the flows of power themselves, we start to create a better map to go through these traditions, and not even whether you're a practitioner or not, just going through life. But I always think about our menstrual cycles, our larger life cycles, which include menarche, can include childbirth and breastfeeding, include perimenopause. Like, I think of these as flows of power, like these are movements of Shakti through us. And we can fight the river, which is what we're taught to do in a man's world. Like, we're taught to kind of try to hormonally imitate a male body so we can function in a world that was set up by a male constitution, right? Or what to me is more powerful is we actually, like you're saying, we let these flows of power move through us. We stop fighting them. Like, a lot of PMS, a lot of the difficulties we have are from exactly what you said, not resting when we need to rest, not, we're just going against the way the energy's flowing through us. And I've always looked at these as initiatory gateways for women. And there's something that, like, in a male body, we kind of have to seek. Like, if we look at indigenous cultures, there were always like very specific rites of passage for men, especially, that would kind of imitate these natural rites of passage that the female body goes through. So in some ways, we have this, it's a superpower. Like, we can look at it as a burden, or we can look at it as a superpower that ties us even more intimately to the cycles of the earth, to the cycles even of the cosmos. We get to have this very directly intimate relationship. And I think to be a female practitioner, we have to find a harmony in that relationship itself. And so I just want to express gratitude for you bringing this topic and your own experience. And I personally will be watching this space. You said, watch this space. I'm like, yeah, I'm watching as I start entering my own shifts and all of that. It's really a gift, because especially with perimenopause, there's hardly any information out there. Like, as I'm learning about it and starting to feel just the beginnings of it in my own body, and hearing from my dear sisters who are ahead of me on the journey, I'm just like, so my mother just suffered through this and didn't say anything. Like, she just went, and she probably was getting the hormonal replacement therapies and like this, but just like, she never told me about her experience of that. Like, we don't culturally talk about that. And so women are entering these phases completely unprepared. And
Yeah, men and women are going to the doctors even with experiences of increased anxiety and depression because of the hormonal fluctuations, and are being put on antidepressants. Instead of it being highlighted, listen, you are entering this sacred phase of your life, they're being like put on antidepressants. It's just, yeah, it's just such a lack of acknowledgement of this, because this is a sacred transition. It is a rite of passage. And I do have to say, this for me, my mother went through menopause in her early 30s, and my grandmother, yeah. And I noticed hormonal changes when I was 29. Yeah, very slight, very slight. It kicked in more when I was 37. But I believe that I'm 47 now and I'm still bleeding because of my lifestyle as a yogini, because of the food that I eat, because I detoxify my body every year, and homeopathy. I really praise homeopathy with this. I believe that it's thanks to homeopathy that I have actually reduced the size of my endometriosis cyst considerably, to the point where gynecologists don't believe me. But I've got all the ultrasounds over the years, you know, just to show that. So it's just not acknowledged, and it's time for us to acknowledge it for ourselves, you know, and take back this power physically, mentally, and spiritually as well. Yeah, and I really want to say, you know, for those sisters that are really on the spiritual path, many of you probably go to India and these different places, and you might discover that during menstruation, there's some things you can't do, there's certain temples you can't go into, and just really, you know, in those moments, be with the earth, you know, be with Ma in all of her different moments, you know, her different phases. It doesn't have to be a temple that we understand as a man-woman constructed temple. Mother Earth is a temple in herself, you know, and our bodies are her. So yeah, it's just finding these little ways, you know, for us to really claim our sovereignty, yeah, in that, yeah, in the beautiful way.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so beautiful. The last thing I just want to say about perimenopause, or how I've chosen as somebody who's heading in that direction eventually, hopefully a little longer than, you know, we'll see. But I really see it as a transition into the wisdom years. You know, we've had so much life experience, and there is like, you know, there's something about the initiation, even if it is a rough transition, because it's different for every woman. It is difficult, you know, the pitta, the everything you talked about. But just to remember what's on the other side of that is the wisdom years. And this is a whole other topic we won't go into necessarily, but just to say that societally, our worth as women has really been tied to our reproductive years, to
Yes.
our sexual availability, to our sexual attractiveness. And so there's a lot of resistance to particularly perimenopause. Nowadays, there's so many treatments to try to reverse aging, to stay young, to keep bleeding for longer. And I really want to just encourage, you know, for those of you here listening, that we really start to embrace nature, because these are her movements, that we embrace the movement into our wisdom years, that we wear our wrinkles proudly, that we wear, you know, these changes, and also that we can do it gracefully, of course, but that we really embrace that a woman's worth is not just limited to her reproductive years.
Beautiful, Halo. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And as exactly, I think you're a wonderful example of this, the wisdom you're sharing with us here from moving in through those transitions into the wisdom years. So
Mm.
as we close up, as we wrap up, just one more question. I mean, you've shared so much around this already, but any advice you would give for those who are maybe newer to the path of sadhana, in relation to our topic, or it could also be unrelated to the topic?
Find what inspires you and keeps you anchored in the practice. And it doesn't matter what form the divinity touches you the most. Try to find that form. It might be in the elements, in a particular god, goddess, in feeling your own heart. But find that anchor, because we all have that anchor. And water that anchor. Just keep watering that, because in this crazy world that we live in, with all the difficulties that we face, the practice and our faith is the only true solid anchor that we have on our own, that nobody can take away from us. So we just have to keep watering that seed.
Wow. Jai Mang. Thank you
Yeah,
so much, Rodasi, for sharing your wisdom here with us today. This was so rich. And thank you so much to all of you who have been here in this with us. We will see you tomorrow for day 7. Our journey continues by her grace. So Jai Ma, and may this wisdom serve you.